I'm Dean Bushmiller, and this is Risk Management. If you're not seeing the complete version, go to expandingsecurity.com. You can also get quizzes, badges, and this mind map with all the dynamic links in it. So let's get started. So let's first get a couple of definitions down, and then we'll go through the process, and I'll go through it at two different levels. Risk is the state of uncertainty in which some possibilities involve loss. Now, if you're a project management person like a PMI, you'll say, but there's also the positive value. But as security people, we're like, no, everything sucks. The whole world is going to die, and that's all we really care about. When we look at assessments or risk assessment, we're measuring things. And those measurements have to be set up in observations that quantify or reduce uncertainty, not reduce risk. And then we do risk assessments, and then we just change the word uncertainty into risk. But successful measurement must be clearly described and in terms of observables. And so when we talk about heat maps, we find out that that's not really observable at that point. Management, okay, that's mission decision-making that requires good measurement data. So when we want to make management decisions, we need good data. That good data comes from measurement, and that measurement is precise. Okay, why do we do risk management? Well, most of the time it's for compliance, but then in really evolved organizations, it's great for decision support and architecture. The risk process, here's the real short overview. So we have this form of what is acceptable risk, and that's defined by the business owner, and that changes very often. Sometimes we call this the appetite. The problem is that appetite is communicated rarely. Your boss doesn't walk up to you and go, I feel a little full today on risk, or my stomach's kind of empty, so I can go ahead and take on a lot. I don't do any of that stuff. Next is current risk, and that's calculated by a technician. They do an inventory, they do calculations, and they get a result, and they hand that over to management. And management compares the gap, the difference between what is acceptable risk and what is current risk. And this mythical meeting happens between the business owner and the technician. It doesn't, because there's layers in between the business owner and the technician. We'll get to that later. So then what we do is we set some form of options to determine what can actually be done. And this is usually proposed by a technician and paid for by an owner. So somebody who wants the thing versus somebody who pays for the thing, they're separated at that point. When we look at the mission or the business or the organizational level risk management out there, we start at this very high level and look for the key roles, the risk tolerance, the assessment. We figure out what the control baselines are, what the minimum settings for all controls in our environment are. We look for the cybersecurity framework profiles that fit our business. We look for common controls, inheritance, the impact level, prioritization, and then control effectiveness, which allows us to monitor the strategy that we've actually chosen here. And then system and artifacts are published and incorporated into the policy. When we did something wrong and that caused us lots of harm and we got sued for it, then we go ahead and say, okay, we got to put a control in for this particular thing. If we go at the system level, now we're going down into the organization. When we talk about system, it's a little bit different. Now we're looking at assets, and those are identified and prioritized. They're usually computing systems, or maybe they're applications or cloud-based systems. And this is mapped from the functions, and the processes are mapped back and forth to each other. The stakeholder here is going to be identified. Usually that's the line of business manager that is responsible from a, hey, we got to get this job done standpoint. They're responsible for that particular application control or service. Then they set an authorization boundary, or one is actually determined for them. This is usually along lines of business. Here, that's your application and you're responsible for it. And then over here, they're responsible for this. Where that gets blurry is when I'm the security guy and you're the accounts payable guy and there's a security component in your job. Now we got to work together. We look at the information types. They're usually identified at this point. And we figure out the life cycle stages are identified and understood. If we're early in the life cycle, then we may make radical changes in risk assessment and risk management to that particular system. If we're really late stage, like we're going to get rid of this in the next couple of years, we may go, slap a Band-Aid on it, whatever it is, put a compensating control in place. Then the risk assessment is actually done, And that's completed, it's updated. Sometimes we have one and sometimes we update one. Sometimes we look at the old one so we can fill in and we just erase the scores and put the new scores in. Then we set the security requirements. Those are the controls. We define those controls and prioritize those. What are the things that we have in place versus what are the things that we need in place? Placement into the enterprise architecture. They're actually getting installed in there. It's determined where they go. The security requirements are matched to the controls implementation. So what do I need versus what do I have? And I go, look, here, we can go ahead and turn that on there. And then we do a system documentation, which usually happens in military organizations. We usually register or assign that asset to somebody, and management, accountability, coordination, and oversight are all part of that structure there. Okay, now we run into the problem. Well, the problems. First off, you get these things. They're called heat maps. Now, I don't know about you, but I always believe, and you can see it in the upper corner there, heat maps are crap. Because determining impact, low, medium, high, and extreme, or likelihood, negligible, low, medium, high, and extreme, those things do not work for me. Now, they may work for me at my level if I'm making all the decisions and I have all the budget and the control. But the reality is that lots of heat maps are produced out there and they really are saying nothing. So that's what we're going to cover in this particular set of mind maps.